the energy and the rawness and the explosiveness of it all. And I didn't really have musical ambitions. I just, felt that my task in the world was not to be a very skilled or tight musician. I just wanted to, be very, very raw and wild and tamed and go bananas behind the kit. Eventually, I found out that, that was very counterproductive, and it held me back as a musician, and it held my band back as well. And I guess that I spent years and years before realizing that I needed to have two thoughts in my head at the same time. That, I needed to learn basic grooves in order to be a good drummer for my band. I needed to try to adopt a more, musical thinking and more musical approach to my own work.
Hey, what's up, Vox and Hops heads? I'm Matt, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, brought to you by Sound, Townland Media, and Evergreen Podcast. I hope you've had a glorious week. I most certainly did. This Vox and Hops episode is presented by Heavy Montreal. Heavy Montreal are Montreal's premier metal promoter, and trust me when I tell you this, if you are ever in Montreal and want to go see a killer metal show, Heavy Montreal will have you covered. I'm beyond stoked to have Heavy Montreal behind the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast. I am on tour right now in Europe with Decapitated, Warbringer, and Carnation. We are wrapping up this tour. We have about 10 more shows left. You should definitely come and check them out if you live in Germany. If you live in Italy, if you live in France, we are still coming around. This tour wraps up on June 7th, so please grab your tickets and come hang out with me. You can get those tickets at voxandhops.com/Cryptopsy. Grab those tickets and come drink some beer with me and have fun with the Cryptopsy boys while we're out here in Europe with Decapitated, Warbringer, and Carnation. Now, today on the podcast, I'm very stoked to be with Frost, the legendary drummer of Satyricon and 1349. Get ready, everyone. This is Vox and Hops, episode number 498.
I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Today I'm very stoked to be with Frost from 1349, Satyricon, a whole bunch of other amazing bands, a legendary drummer. But more than that, he is probably as legendary in the craft beer scene as I am trying to be. There's Dave Whitty, there's myself, and there is you, to name a few of the craft beer metalhead enthusiasts that are predominantly known in the world as being the beer people in the metal scene, craft beer, that is. I've been running this podcast for over 6 years now, and so many people have told me that I have to get Frost on the podcast. It's taken me over 6 years, and I really apologize that it's taken this long. So thank you, Katie Suspiria, for finally making this happen. She's been pushing this for years, trying to get me with you doing this. My friend Mega, FOH, tour manager who toured with you when you were out with Ultimas and Abath, I want to say, he finished that tour. He was like, you got to get Frost on the podcast. A long introduction just to say, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very fine. I'm also a bit excited these days. I'm 2 days away from going on tour with Satyricon in Europe again.
Nice.
For the first time in 6 years.
Oh.
It feels like almost something of a comeback. I mean, Satyricon did do a string of live shows during the festival season last year. And we did some shows in Latin America in the autumn, but we haven't toured Europe in 6 years now, and that feels like a very, very long break. I guess the pandemic had something to do with it, and also, the band have done various things that has made it less natural for us to tour. I mean, we did an art exhibition in Oslo, and an album was made in order to support that very special exhibition, and that is not the kind of music that you would tour with. So now that we are finally back as a touring band in Europe, that feels very exciting for me.
I agree. That is very exciting because, in case people don't know, when you do the festival runs in the summer, and when you do Latin America, I literally just finished that with Cryptopsy. It's not like a normal tour. It's not like a nice routine of living in the bus with your bandmates and spending a lot of time together and conversing and then spending time with fans. Festivals, you're all over the place. You're flying from one to the other. And it's the same thing in Latin America. So you don't get to really be comfortable. So I'm very excited for you guys to be back. 6 years is a long time not doing that, what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm very happy that it's about to happen again now. And well, there are pluses and minuses about going on bus tours.
Yes.
But, I'm one of those that managed to thrive even in that kind of environment. I mean, a crummy little bunk and, very little privacy, and you have to stick with dealing a lot with people, and you cannot really be by yourself if you want to. You have to accept the conditions. But on the other hand, for as long as I get to do work with my band and basically, do something that I have a passion for, then I'm very happy.
It's very, very true. It's really, so thank you for taking the time. There's like this countdown when a tour is coming, right? You see it coming and it seems so far away when it's a few weeks, and then all of a sudden it's in 2 days. And then you're like, oh my God, I got to do all this shit at home in order to make that happen, and all these boxes to check to get out there to crush a whole bunch of shows, living in cramped quarters. You're 100% right. And having zero privacy. We're completely surrounded by people, but completely isolated at the same time because we're just completely... There's no private space on a tour bus. It's crazy aside from your bunk, but even then, people are farting, people are snoring. We're lucky to get to do it, but it's not as easy as people think it is.
Yeah, you're very, very right, and it's an acquired taste in a way. Just like beer.
Correct. What I've been doing recently, and I did it on the Latin America tour that I just did, was I convinced myself that I like the things I don't like. I love flying, I tell myself as I'm sitting.
Yeah, exactly.
I love this.
That's too far a stretch for me. I wouldn't be able to convince myself about just that. But,
I love it. I love sitting in the airports for no reason for hours ahead of that. Speaking of beer, this is Vox&Hops. And since you're a special beer god guest, I have reached into my cellar and pulled out a special beer for you that I'm going to share with you virtually right now. This is Goose Island, Bourbon County from 2022, given to me by my very good friend Brad Greyer, who is an uber beer friend from the United States, and he always brings stuff from his cellar out to the Cryptopsy gang and other bands that he's good friends with whenever he's close by or he can come out and visit us. So this is a bourbon-aged coffee stout. You're not going to be sipping on anything right now, but if you were drinking something, what would you be drinking, Frost?
Just prior to doing this podcast with you, I was drinking my Antonio from Birra del Borgo, Italian dry hopped Imperial Pilsner. It's one that I really like a lot. Crisp and nice, and very much to my taste.
I said I'm loving the resurgence and like this new fans that are super into beer nerds, that is hoppy Pilsners. I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, and the umami taste is just, it has a lot of it.
That's amazing. So take me back to, do you remember the very, very first beer you drank, Frost? Not the craft beer, your first experience with beer. Do you remember that? Is there a memory that you have of that?
No, I'm striving to remember now as you ask me. What could that have been? I mean, I was a bit late. I wasn't one of those guys that went to parties, when I was like 13 or 14. Like, I mean, I grew up in the countryside.
Yeah.
And people were starting to go to parties, when they were 11 or 12.
Ooh, okay.
People would drink booze.
Okay,
That was typical up there. But they would also drink, beers. And I was not one of those party guys. I started a bit later. But yeah, I guess when I was like 14 years old, I did drink some ordinary Pilsner beers. Wasn't really a huge fan.
No, at first,
But a
no,
few
we're
years
not.
later, that was a very different story. And it's weird because I tend to be a little oversensitive sometimes about things, and that's still the case today, and that's just how I am. But I did react a lot to the bitterness in beers, and I thought of it as a rather unpleasant taste.
Just an assault on your palate.
But a few years later, I felt the opposite, that I was basically craving some of that bitterness. And eventually, when I discovered that you had IPAs and that sort of stuff, I gravitated towards that. And then I had a period when I turned more to wine, and I decided to try out some more expensive wines just by myself. I mean, I wasn't really inspired or told. I was just discovering an interest in wine and, the world of tastes, basically. And I found out that, if I invest a little money into a better wine than what you would ordinarily drink as an 18 or 19-year-old, which would be, the cheapest thing there is. Well, what would happen then? I was wanting to find out. And then, I spent what was then like $20 on a bottle of wine.
Which was very expensive in comparison. Yeah.
And I didn't really have it much. So that was a tough stretch. And I discovered that if I put some money into a bottle of wine, you would get, a totally different experience. And it was like this world of taste that it exploded in my mouth. And I basically was in the wine world for a few years. But then I went back to trying out some beers again, but now with the experience that I took with me from having been a wine taster for a couple of years. And it would be too much to call it an enthusiast, perhaps, but at least I had an interest that was genuine, and I followed it, and I started to, develop a more refined taste, I guess. And then I brought that to the beer world again, and I discovered that, okay, you do have seasonal beers that are exciting. You have these very bitter beers like IPAs and saisons, and they would taste so much more exciting than the industrial pilsners. And it kind of grew from there. So I basically haven't really answered your
No, this is what it's all about. I love it. I do think it's interesting that you started out not enjoying it the way that, like, most people start out not enjoying. Like, my first foray at listening to Cryptops, even then I didn't enjoy it. And then it was an acquired taste, which is what your body's just not prepared for that. And then you being young at the time and still taking that money that you probably didn't have and investing it in a true experience of something more refined is quite the sacrifice to make at such a young age. Whereas most young people wouldn't do that. They would just go for the volume. I'll take this 20 euros or this $20 and I'll put it into the most amount of beer or wine possible. But that's not what you did. That's interesting.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I think that it's like if you listen to an album that feels interesting, but you'll perhaps also find it difficult to enjoy it because you cannot understand it completely. Perhaps it's too complex for you,
or the sound is just not something you're required to.
Yeah, or simply just too challenging. Well, those are typically the albums that will end up making the biggest impression.
That's true. What would be an album? Let me piggyback off that. What would be an album that did that to you upon your first listen, that you were like, this is interesting, but it's too much for me right now, that now you've really acquired and something super important to you?
I remember very well that when I heard Into the Pandemonium with Celtic Frost the first time, I found it difficult to swallow. It's like I'd expected something that was more in the vein of Morbid Tales or to Megatherium. And then it was, way more diverse. There were these weird elements that were kind of strange and at least uncommon to me. And the fact that you had these orchestrated pieces, you had some almost breakdance, like drum, and all these weird and difficult things going on all over the album. And the fact that they also did, a cover song from a 60s type of pop rock band, all of this was very alienating to a guy that wanted something that was very much in your face and a little, punkish and hard and raw. But eventually, it got under my skin, and I find myself, perhaps playing that album more often than in the other Celtic Frost album.
It had more layers in it.
It grew a lot on me, and I felt that I was taken on a journey, and had something to do with process of maturation, I guess.
Absolutely, yes. And also going back and still giving that record a chance, because nowadays I sound like such an old person when I talk like this on the podcast, but the new generation doesn't have that relationship that we had with purchasing records. We invested in a piece of music and we bought it, and then we take it home, and if we didn't like it, we would still give it a second chance because we bought it. Whereas now with the streaming, if they don't like it, it's gone forever.
Absolutely. And I think that is one of the reasons that music in general was much more exciting in the 60s and 70s and 80s, because people would kind of be forced to follow the bands that they liked, even when they released albums that
they didn't like.
A bit difficult to get into. They would still buy the album because they had that kind of relationship with their favorite bands, and eventually they would kind of have some musical upbringing.
Yeah, you're growing with the artist. Even if the artist has already grown before you, you get the chance to grow with them, even if it takes some time.
And I guess that is one of the reasons that you feel that, a decade doesn't really have a very expressed musical identity. I mean, you could always tell in the 60s whether you were listening to music from that decade or from the decade before.
True.
And likewise with the 70s. And if you grew up in the 80s, like I did, music from the 50s would feel like a totally different age, like dinosaur music. It would feel like something that doesn't really belong in a radio show, for instance. But if you listen to music that is 30 years old today,
I know, yeah,
I know, feel like it's something that is recorded yesterday, and everything has slowed down. You don't have the same kind of
rapid evolution
development going on, and that is exactly because now people can just choose whatever they like and they will stay with that, and that also prevents development from going on, I think, which is unfortunate in my book. But
I agree. It's like if you're waiting for a new Meshuggah record, and there's no new Meshuggah record coming out, there's X 20,000 bands that sound just like Meshuggah that you can go listen to instead.
So people aren't challenged in the same way as people were in the 70s and 80s, for instance. If you see the development in the metal world from the very beginning of the 80s until the very end, where you actually had, you had death metal bands and black metal bands and grindcore bands.
Extreme vocals, extreme drumming.
In the beginning of the decade, you didn't have anything that was anywhere close to that, you know. But luckily, I can see a tendency that albums are coming back. Actually, people are now buying vinyls again, and I hope it continues because
I agree.
It might be like some kind of a counter reaction, and I welcome that.
It's nice to have something that's physical that you can actually hold after all the work that we put into something, instead of just some file that sits on some server somewhere.
Yeah, no doubt, and I have a feeling that more and more people actually discover that, and we are so lucky in the metal world that we still have, you know, a fan culture. I guess you don't really have that in pop music, but in metal you still have that. And fans typically like something physical. They like albums or CDs. They like T-shirts and other kinds of merchandise. And perhaps that could be somewhat of a savior for this genre. That, you know, perhaps you will get the albums back and that we will get something that was closer to the golden age of this genre.
I hope that we're all still around while that comes around. Do you remember your first time on stage, the very, very first show that you ever played?
That is a bit difficult to answer because I did a couple of performances with, you know, just kind of a hobby band that wasn't really serious. And I don't remember that too well, but the first show ever that I did, which was a proper show, was actually the first show Satyricon ever did in 1996, and that was an experience that I certainly remember very, very well, because Satyricon wasn't really meant to be a live band in a traditional sense. It was Satyr and me. And we had some session musicians that teamed up with us, and on this very, very first show, that happened to be like Nocturnal Pelto from Darkstone, playing the guitar with us, and we actually did a show with Darkstone and Dissection back in 1996. That was very, very radical. It's like,
yeah.
It's a very rough start to have that as your very first show, playing in a rather large musical hall in your hometown, Rockefeller.
Wow, yeah.
And it was sold out, and Satyr basically arranged the show himself, and we rented the place and we sold out the show, and it was those three bands.
That's a good way to start, though.
So we had like Satyricon doing the first show ever in front of like 1,500 people, and we were playing with an experienced live band, which this was at the time. I mean, they were so much better than us back then. And then we had Darkstone doing their, you know, one and only proper show as a black metal band. They had done some shows prior to that in Finland, I think, but that was when they did a more death metal oriented kind of music. But you know, the Darkstone that we got to know later did that show only, and there has been nothing since.
Amazing! Wow, a piece of history.
That was some start.
Yeah. What was your mindset behind that? Is there, like, I to this day still get a little bit nervous. Is that something that you struggled with back then? Nerves and stuff? And is it something that you've gotten over with?
Yeah, I can assure you that. I mean, I'm the kind of person that will probably remain a little nervous throughout my entire career as a musician. It will never completely go away.
I see that as being healthy, personally, yeah.
Experience that at least I live pretty well with it, and I basically trust that we will do very good shows. But back then, it was horrible.
Is that just leading up to the show, or is it something that still persists during the show as well?
Yeah, usually it more or less goes away during the show because of all the adrenaline.
Your brain is busy, yeah.
But prior to shows, yeah, I feel it quite a lot.
What is that routine? How do you cope with that now? Because we can't get drunk and we can't be crazy because we have too much fucking things to do on stage.
Right. Well, we cannot do that. So, you know, for many, many years, I've had like lots of routines and something that is almost like, these small rituals that I do in order to get focused and in order to get, physically and mentally prepared for what's. So I do mobility exercises, I do some yoga, I do some breathing exercises, and I sit down with a little warm-up kit in order to get ready, and that basically helps a lot. And for as long as I, get through the routines, I more or less know that it's going to be fine unless something very unexpected happens. I mean, you can have technical fuck-ups and all of that, but
that's not us, though. That's the gear gods are against us when that happens.
Yeah, that could happen, but
it's not going to happen in 2 days, though. That first gig with Satyricon back after 6 years is it's going to be just flawless, Frost.
Yeah. I hope that we avoid any technical catastrophe.
To talk to me about writing drums now versus when you first started, how does your mindset change over the years and how you approach a drum set as an older, more mature player versus than when you were a young tiger of a kid, let's say?
It's two different worlds. When I started out, it was basically all about intensity, explosive energy, a lot of aggression, and even, I still feel a lot of anger and sometimes even fury when I play. That's just, part of what I express. It's always been there. For good and for bad, it's part of who I am as a person and as a musician, and that's still there. But that basically dominated me when I was younger, and also I came from a place where it was all about, getting in touch with the energy and the rawness and the explosiveness of it all. And I didn't really have musical ambitions. I just, felt that my task in the world was not to be a very skilled or tight musician.
It was about the energy.
I just wanted to, be very, very raw and wild and tamed and go bananas behind the kit. Eventually, I found out that, that was very counterproductive, and it held me back as a musician, and it held my band back as well. And I guess that I spent years and years before realizing that I needed to have two thoughts in my head at the same time. That, I needed to learn basic grooves in order to be a good drummer for my band. I needed to try to adopt a more, musical thinking and more musical approach to my own work.
You have to learn how to walk before you could run, basically.
Yeah, right. Because I wanted to run and do the sprint distances right away before even knowing how to walk. And looking back at it, that was absolute madness. But on the other hand, if I had been forced to do it the right way, and if I were to, learn the basics and take lessons and all of that before starting to play with a high-profile band, well, I would have said, fuck this. I'm not going to do it because that's not for me. There are other people in the world that can do that, but that's not why I'm here.
That's hard, though, to match. I can only imagine you back then, like just trying, because you hit the studio with all that aggressivity. Certain shows, you just fall right into that mindset of doing something. I'm going to be so fucking extreme right now and destroy this drum set and bring that fury. But some nights you're just not feeling it. And for you to push yourself mentally to get to that level must have been difficult night after night.
Yeah, that is probably true. But that is something that I don't think I've ever played a show where I'm not really,
into it. Yeah.
With that with that, aggression, but it's not dominating me anymore like it did before. I feel that now I have a certain sense of control, and I can also experience moments of just calm and tranquility, and I can sync much more with the music. But I feel that the music that I play is inherently aggressive, and that it kind of suits the music. Well, I really let it all out, but I can also hold back, and that makes it much more interesting to play, because I feel that I can kind of move along with the music, almost like you're doing some kind of a dance.
The dynamics, yeah.
So just that kind of, dancing with the songs that you play makes it much more interesting to play the songs. And every time I play a song, whether I rehearse or play it live, I feel that there is something new. It's never the same 2 days in a row,
That's fun.
And that keeps music being interesting.
How prepared are you when you step into a studio for a session? Are you the type of drummer that has everything mapped out in your mind, or do you open yourself to we call them happy accidents in Cryptopsy? Flo will just try some fill, and then that becomes the fill, and then when it comes time to play that song live later on, he's got to relearn what the hell he did.
Yeah, well, I have experienced both. I try to be prepared, but it's not like there is no room for improvisations, for instance. But not that much as in the early days, because then it was all improvisations almost. And then I had to, do exactly what you said, man. And you had to figure out
what the fuck did I do there?
Be creative, because there was no very
no videos of it, no nothing.
Behind it also. Yeah, but I basically have most things I do planned and rehearsed and everything now.
That's a good mature way of doing things. I love making beer collabs. I've released probably almost 100 of them in the past 6 years, teaming up with breweries to make beers, whether it be for Cryptopsy or for the podcast itself, Vox&Hops. I know that you guys made a bunch of beers, so let's talk about a few of those. Shout out to Surly, first off. I just was there. Had a great time. Always have a great time there. Talk to me about making beers for 1349, for other things that you've done. How did these things come together, and what is your involvement in it? Talk to me about beer collabs, please.
The whole 3049 beer project was born out of us in 3049 meeting Todd Haug from Shirley back in 2010. 3049 had been doing a show in St. Paul, close to where Todd Haug was living back in the days. We were opening up for Cannibal Corpse, and Todd was at this show. He liked it a lot, obviously. And after the show, a couple of us in 3049, we were standing in the bar at the venue. And Todd approached us. We had never met him before. But he said that he was a huge fan and that he loved the show, and that he could see that we were a bit more into beers than, the average guy. Because we would be, ordering those kind of beers that he himself would order.
Exactly, yeah.
And when I'm on tour, I usually do not drink beer if we have a show day the day after. But this time here, we had this very, very long drive.
So you had a drive then. There you go.
Or something. So that meant we would have like this driving day without any show. So I thought that, okay, I could have a beer or two now and relax a little. And turned out that this was a bit lucky, because since Todd was there and just happened to meet us, as we were ordering some craft beers instead of the industrial stuff that most others had, he saw that, oh, how cool. Great band, and these guys seemed to like beer as well. And he said that he was a craft brewer, and he had this brewery in town, and he said, you guys should have like a band beer, which, we hadn't really thought about that, because in Norway, nobody really had that. It was just a strange thought. Perhaps that was a bit more common in the United States in 2010. I don't know, but
I don't think it was. I think there was just a handful of you guys that were doing collabs at that point. Now there's way more, but yeah.
So he was basically, just offering us
the opportunity,
to do a collab, and he said that I would very much like to brew your beer. Would you have any idea what that could be? And I was a bit bold, and I said that yes, I think so. I think I know very well what that should be. And what I had in mind was basically what eventually became the 3049 Black Ale, which I thought of as almost like a reflection of the band itself, but in a beer form. Very, 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 very intense, and a pitch black brew with notes of, coffee and dark chocolate and licorice, and
with a hoppy bite.
Very hoppy, of course, and yeah, like very stingy and edgy, and strong. And I thought that something that I haven't really tried, but which I would like to try, is something that is in the intersection between a Russian Imperial Stout
and an IPA,
and an Imperial Black IPA, and a barley wine. I didn't really, at least to my knowledge, there didn't exist any beers like that at the time.
It's a very uncommon for sure. So it's a ballsy move for you to pitch that to Surly.
So I thought that that could be the beer. That would it would make sense to have the 3049 logo on
something that intense,
that type. And also I had some thoughts when it came to hop varieties and all of that. Not the brewer myself, but I knew at least enough that there were certain. Yeah, I had certain hop preferences, and I like very much the old school West Coast IPA style, and like resinous tastes, and I also thought that there should be an element of forest in the beer, and I also wanted to express the citrusy part of it, and I thought that you can do all these things at once if you just do it right.
With the right hops, yeah.
And since we had a skilled guy like Todd Haug to actually manifest this idea and actually make a beer out of a taste profile, well, we felt that there was a huge potential here, and that this was very exciting. So at least we were talking about this and exchanging ideas, but then I thought the next day after having met Todd that we will probably not hear from him again.
Which happened.
He was at our show being a bit enthusiastic, brewer, and had a couple of glasses. I mean,
you never know.
It's easy to talk about such plans, but then they don't really happen, But I was surprised to actually get a very long email from Todd as we were coming home from our tour in the States. Obviously, he wanted to actually do it. And I thought that, okay, then we are going to seize the chance and try to do something proper out of it. So I started delving deeper into it, and I was thinking basically day and night about this for a while. And I wanted to describe the kind of tastes I wanted in this black ale. And I always felt that, I managed to describe most of what I wanted there, but not all of it. And then I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was actually uttering the word eucalyptus as I was waking up. Almost like this eureka thing. But I said eucalyptus. And it dawned upon me that this was a kind of aromatic element that I wanted in the beer. And I got up and sent Tom an email and said that I think that like this missing aroma that I want to have in our black ale should be something like eucalyptus, something almost minty and cooling. It should be the aftertaste. Are there, ways to go ahead to express that, or do we actually need to put eucalyptus in it somehow? And they said that no, it's fully possible to have a little of that, cooling, minty taste if you use the right kinds of hops and add them at the right point of
the boil and stuff.
In the brewing process, right? So he said, this is doable, and all the other things I wanted is also doable. And he said it's going to be, a very, very potent and strange brew, but I guess that suits you guys. And eventually, after having finished work with the taste profile for black ale, I also realized that we shouldn't have only one beer, we should have two. I thought that this black ale is going to be, a very, very powerful and strong thing, and it will not really fit all occasions, so to speak. What about having a beer that would be a nice beer to have backstage after a show, or a beer that would be nice to drink as you watch a 3049 show? This black ale thing is probably not what you would
it's
like
a bit more
to have
refined.
backstage.
Yeah,
you would have something refreshing. And then I thought that, well, perhaps a very delicate, refreshing pale ale could be something. A little hoppy and stingy, almost like an IPA, but not too strong. Thirst quenching and crisp, and something that you would be able to drink without getting
too inebriated.
Drunk, yeah. Because if you walk off stage, you are
dehydrated.
You are dehydrated and you have spent your resources.
You're very thirsty too.
You can't really take that much. So I thought that rather than having like a hop monster IPA, that I like that, but I thought that this should be something else. This should be crisp and edgy enough to deserve having the 3049 name on the bottle, but this should be like, the backstage beer.
That's really
and
interesting.
I thought that somehow those two sounded very neat together. That you could have like a light ale and a pitch black one, and representing very, very, different beer ideas, and perhaps also being made to serve very different purposes, right? And then it kind of got together for me, because when I had established that thought, it felt like this beer project was a proper project, that it could be something that we could, build on. And we actually... Todd was very positive to this.
Todd was cool with you pitching, no, I want two beers, because that's like...
yeah.
That's very cool.
And I think it made sense to him as well when I explained it.
You could sell way more pale ales than a big, dark black ale, that's for sure.
So... and then I thought that they should have something in common, these two also. So I said that we should have that... forest element in both beers. So it could be, we had decided to add spruce. Actually, branches of spruce, they are freeze dried, and but it could have been pine needles or something. But at least that element that builds on what is already present from the hops, like present hops.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it takes the aroma those extra few meters where you actually, get into the forest.
It's a full-body experience. I like it.
Yeah, and also the same thing with the citrus, that you have citrusy notes from the hops as well. but I also wanted to add some actual citrus to, take those extra meters. So we use zest of bitter orange, and that works very well. And we use it both in the black ale and in the pale ale. And I think of these tastes as they contribute to constitute a 3049 beer. Beer aroma, or like the very foundation for it all. So
that's so interesting. You're really, really, really hands-on. So this beer comes out, and you guys were not on tour or did they line it up for when you were coming back through the States so you could be there and taste this beer and celebrate it? Darkness Days, is that something you guys have done? The festival that they do?
Well, we have. I'm not sure if the band has actually done a show at the Dark Lord Day. I was not on that tour myself, you see. There are some US tours that 3049 have done without my participation because I've been busy with Satyricon.
I understand the game, yeah.
Yeah. And 3049 needs to be active without me.
Absolutely, yeah. That's mature. That's mature of you to
my first priority, since it's my main band. But I do whatever I can do with 3049 always, and I record the drums for all the albums, and I make the drums also, and I play the shows that I can. But
you've tasted the beer. You've the black ale and the pale ale. You got to actually experience them after all your involvement in creating.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Did it live up to your expectations? Did Todd do a good job?
Yeah, I mean he did a test batch that I got to try. Absolutely fantastic beers, both the pale ale and the black ale. And then it was made in Norway. That was like part of the plan, that we should produce the beer both in the US and in Norway.
What brewery did it?
That was Todd's suggestion to
That's
begin
smart,
with.
Yeah. What brewery did it in Norway?
We brewed the very first 3049 beers in Norway, in Stavanger by Lervig. I reached out to several of them. Handcraft breweries in Norway back at the time, and I just presented
give them the pitch.
And I talked to several of these breweries, and there were several of them that were actually interested, but Lervig was the brewery that was actually willing to do it in a way that we felt comfortable with, because they would be willing to let us let us take part instead of
just doing
taking
it all.
full control themselves. They would actually allow us to be part of the process and do a proper collab instead of
just slapping your label on something.
Just do this one batch and get it on the market, and that would be that. We always said that it's fundamental that it's not done like that. This is not going to be, like just a band beer. This at one time happening. We wanted to, launch a project that would be living its own life, and perhaps, eventually make more than just a couple types of beers, but perhaps having a third brew, and perhaps even a fourth, or even more than that. And just to build something from scratch and make it into a venture.
Mm-hmm. I think it's super interesting. So the beers are still available. That's my next question.
So we aim to continue making the pale ale and the black ale, and we have a third brew, which is simply called the Tree, which was released a short while ago. It has been made in a very limited quantity up to now, it's great. It's well, I call it a spiced, massively hopped triple.
Ooh, okay. That sounds not like an after show beer. It sounds like you have one very relaxed. Yeah.
Very, very particular and special beer. We are very satisfied with.
What are the spices that you chose for that?
We use we like with all the 3049 beers, at least those that we have made up until now. They do have an element of spruce and of bitter orange zest. So it's just this
overlying theme that just is. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's very cool.
Like a red thread that runs through the entire project. Yeah.
Very interesting.
And contributes to give the 3049 beer some kind of identity odor.
Absolutely, and a cohesiveness
and
between.
It's also there are tastes that at least I personally like them a lot in beers, and the other guys seem to do that as well. And they fit very well, at least with what we have done up until now. So that's there. And in addition, we have yarrow in the triple, which is like this bitter herb,
okay, interesting.
I know it was used for bittering beers here in Norway, at least, where it didn't really have hops, the other kinds of bittering agents.
A yarrow, okay.
Yeah, and yarrow was an herb which was used. And we have, both a lot of hops and this bitter yarrow root, which gives it like an extra bitterness and a cool herbal aroma in addition to that. And I think that it sits very well with a, rather rich, slightly sweet taste.
Malty triples, yeah.
Yeah, but I thought that, triple is a cool place to start because that richness and generosity gives you the opportunity to also add a lot of bitterness and, these edgy, stingy flavors so that you kind of have a marriage of opposites. You have the rich and generous on one side, and then you have the firm and stingy on the others. And that to me is very interesting, and I think it works well.
It's like a whole body experience, all these beers. Everything I'm hearing, it just makes me very excited about craft beer again. And I being a craft beer enthusiast for over 10 years now, I'm happy that you're making me enthused again, because you can get a little bit bored with just drinking double hopped IPAs over and over again. So thank you, Frost, I'm excited right now. And I got to get my hands.
To hear that. It's basically the same things that I heard from Todd when I described the idea to him. He said that he was actually getting so thirsty that he needed to go out and have himself a beer, he said. And,
oh, man.
And that's some kind of acknowledgement, I guess, coming from a guy like him.
Oh yeah, he's one of the best.
Star, among artisanal brewers.
Mm-hmm. I have one last question. I don't want to keep you too long. You have 2 days before you're going on tour, and I know what those last 2 days are like at home before a tour. It probably doesn't happen to you very often because, as you mentioned, you do not drink when you have a show the next day. But every once in a while, it happens to everyone. What is your hangover cure when you drink too many beers and you wake up the next day and you feel like shit? What do you do?
Well, sticking to your routines can at least help you a little, I suppose, which I do. And like if I go to rehearsal and feeling a little groggy, then I try to be, very meticulous about my routines, warming up properly, seeing to it that I stretch out and do everything I can in order to make the body play along with me. It feels like, entering the warfield, doing what I do, and I try to prepare for war no matter what, and it's particularly important if you feel that you don't have all that energy that you would have wanted, or if you feel a little tired, And perhaps, that extra cup of coffee and a glass of cold Coke, before getting into it. That helps a little as well.
Absolutely. The routine is important. You can't sit and just be stuck in a hangover. You got to go and move, and you got to get out there. And
exactly. You cannot really, go into it, because then it's gonna
take over.
Yeah.
Frost, thank you so much for taking the time, hanging out with me, talking about craft beer. I've been having a lot of people on the podcast lately where they don't talk about beer, so I'm excited that this happened, and we're talking about beer. This is great. Everyone go see Satyricon. Everyone go see 1349. They're also touring Europe coming up in May. And check out The Wolf and the King that dropped back in October. This has been great. I can't wait to do this face-to-face one day. Thank you so much, Frost.
Yeah, thanks for a fine conversation, Matt.
Hey, thank you all so much for listening right today. You know that I love and appreciate that. Man, this was an amazing conversation. Long overdue, as I mentioned. So many people have been telling me that I had to get Frost on the podcast. I'm beyond stoked that I did. He has just a very interesting mindset as to what consists a good beer, an interesting beer, just thinking outside of the box of beer styles. I think it's extremely interesting the way that he's crafted all of the 1349 beers, and it really has excited me again in the world of craft beer. I'm stoked that he went back on tour. I know that it went well because some of the crew members out here with Decap were on that tour. So it's great that happened, and I can't wait to hang out with Frost again. Massive cheers. The Vox&Hops Metal Podcast is brought to you by Sound Talent Media and Evergreen Podcasts. I hope you have a killer rest of the week. I will be back next week with another episode on Thursday, but until then, remember to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. Cheers, Vox&Hops heads.